Well, I made a mistake. I had two choices and I chose poorly. I'll explain in a second. Gotta drop some mineral off to the girls. I keep getting questions on what I do for both fly control and my mineral and supplement program. I'm gonna do two separate videos on both of those things to kind of talk about what I've come up with over the years. All right, bear with me here. I'm walking over to that 4-acre lease. Let's talk about the mistake that I made. So, in short, I didn't mow. I didn't mow at all. I didn't touch this 4 acres at all, and it's actually going to end up hurting me because the stuff that's grown on it now is so thick and overgrown. I just don't think the cows are going to do well on it, and I don't think it's going to last me as long as I hoped in order to get my home pastures recovered and regrown in time. But I'll show you what I'm dealing with here and what I'm talking about. Before I go any further, this pasture is the neighbor's, and it's a 4-acre lease that I secured a few months back, and it had sat fallow. It had been years since any livestock had been on this, and that livestock really was in the form of horses. It gets extremely overgrown every year, and this property sold to actually two new buyers. It was a 20-acre chunk of land that got split right down the middle, two 10-acre lots basically, and both of them ended up selling. I've worked with the neighbor that is closest to our side over the last year or so. I was actually over here and I mowed it a few times last year just to kind of see what would grow back, because it was always in the back of my mind that if he wasn't going to utilize this, that I would end up approaching him to see if he was cool with me putting the cows on here, and that's exactly what ended up happening. The downside is, and I guess this is the lesson that I learned, I got too wrapped up in what was going on with the rest of the United States, particularly further out west, that was dealing with a heavy drought, and I let that influence my decisions here. And it's not entirely bad. I'm new to this, I don't know everything. I'm still learning. I have a lot to learn, and this is a mistake that I'm going to learn from. So it's not entirely a bad deal. I try and get as much information as I can on everything when it comes to cattle and grazing and soil health and land management, regardless of where that information comes from, where the author or the speaker is, where they are located. So a lot of the publications that I subscribe to, a lot of the online articles that I read, a lot of the podcasts that I listen to are always talking to producers that are out west, and we all know right now they are going through a horrible drought. I got wrapped up in that. It became a real possibility that we were going to be in a drought because of our June weather. I put some videos out talking about my drought plan. Those were all in June, and that was when June was extremely hot, extremely dry, very unseasonable for June here in central Iowa. So I kind of bought into all of this drought worry, that we were going to also be in a drought, and it was going to affect everything that I did for the whole year. And again, we had a really bad drought out here last year, so I wanted to be as prepared as possible. And one of the things that I did to prepare for that was not mow. I didn't want to touch this pasture at all. It's probably been about 2 months now that I've known that I was going to have access to this whenever I needed it. And what I should have done was, as soon as I got the okay from the landowner to put the cows on here, I should have mowed, because as June progressed, towards the end of June, and as all throughout July, we actually ended up getting a lot more rain than I thought we were going to get. Looking back, what I should have done was, as soon as I saw that we had good rain potential in the forecast after getting the okay to lease this property, I absolutely should have just come out here with the tractor and mowed it all down. I also knew, looking at my pastures, right, I did a video on grazing our back pasture 5 times before I had to pull the cows off of that, which was insane. So I knew I had, at this time, another rotation through my back pasture, which is 2.5 acres, plus another rotation through my front pasture, which is 2.5 acres. So I had plenty of grass ahead of me. The other thing that I have since thought about, and I really should have considered this before, is it would have been really tough to overgraze this pasture. And I say that because my intention was just to throw the cows through this 4 acres, as long as it took to get them through and really eat it down, and then they weren't going to be on here again. I just wanted this as a way to get them off of my pastures, get those rest before we went into the fall grazing season, because, you know, kind of in our area, the rule of thumb is anything that you want to be grazing for fall, you need to start stockpiling that in August. And so I just basically wanted to put the cows on this 4 acres for the entire month of August and as long into September as I could. And then once this was depleted and our back pasture and our front pasture was totally regrown, then I put the cows back on the home ranch and run them through that all the way up until I was out of forage. Then I would start feeding hay. That's my strategy every year. So this was only going to get grazed once, and I should have thought about that even if I mow it and they graze it and maybe they set the grass back a little bit, but this is the only time that it's going to get get grazed this year. One time through, maybe taking more than they needed to or eating it before it's fully recovered really wasn't going to set it back. And at the end of the day, let's be honest, the neighbor wouldn't know that it was overgrazed. Our definition of overgrazing is completely different. There would have still been 4 inches of grass on the ground. He probably wouldn't have even known that it was overgrazed, or, you know, that I might have done a little bit of damage to that pasture. So I'll kind of explain real quick what I have set up for it now, because unfortunately my strategy has changed quite a bit. The property line, like I said, splits right down the middle, and what I did was right away I mowed a strip basically right down the dividing line of this property, and then I mowed a path kind of tracing where my temporary perimeter fence is going to be. So they're not going to have access to this entire 4 acres between the encroaching timber over there and then a very brushy full tree line over here. It's going to eat up over 2 acres. What I need to do now is I need to put up my poly wire. My plan is to run 2 strands of poly wire around what's going to be my perimeter fence. And then originally I thought I was going to strip graze. I was going to run my reels of poly wire basically north and south here and subdivide this pasture and graze them just like I have been on our home ranch. I'm not going to be able to run the poly wire in my normal size strips and strip graze my way through this pasture. I'm worried that the cows, not only are the cows not going to see the wire, with how thick it is, it's going to draw down the power coming from my charger. I mowed a strip right down the middle of this thing, and I'm basically going to just set up 2 large grazing chunks. So instead of strip grazing them through this pasture and marching my way through this 2.5 acres, I'm going to call it 1 acre fence, 1 acre, and then there's about a 1/2 acre that I also mowed another strip through, and that was just because it kind of snaked around the pond and it wasn't going to be a clean fence line. So I wanted that to be its own deal, graze that and get off of it. So that way I'm not going to move them every single day. It's really mature. There's absolutely nothing of real value that's growing underneath. So my worry is by giving them my normal size strips like I normally would on the home ranch, they're going to run out of food, because in that particular strip that I gave them, there's just not enough. There's just not enough for them to eat that day. And so then I run into, again, now the cows are testing the fences because they don't have enough to eat. They're not happy. They bust their way through the strip fence. And then again, all I have that separates the cows from just getting out and running away is just that 2-strand electric poly wire that may or may not hold them. So this is going to be interesting to see how this works, because like I said, I'm basically gonna put them on an acre. I've taken my measurements, so based off of what I have been feeding them on the home ranch, I kind of have an idea on how many days it should last me, or as in if I were strip grazing them through. Obviously, forage utilization is gonna go down by allowing them to walk and move and basically free graze on this whole acre. They're not going to have as much to eat total throughout the whole acre as they would have if I, stripping them through it. It's like Greg Judy always says, cows eat with 5 mouths. They're one mouth and then they're 4 hooves, meaning that whatever they're walking on, whatever they're trampling as they wander through trying to find the good stuff to eat, more than likely they're not going to come back and eat it. So by allowing them an entire acre to roam around and try and figure out what they should eat, what's good, they're going to end up wasting a lot of it. And actually, at this point, I'm not even going to say wasting, because normally in our setup, I love to leave grass, right? Take half, leave half, trample a bunch on the ground, feed the soil microbes, blah blah blah. In this case, with this stuff being fallow, I bet you the soil microbes, the amount of litter on the ground underneath this is so great from all the years of nothing being eaten and taken down on here, that in this case, I think I truly will be wasting it, because I don't think the soil's really gonna need it that much. So lesson learned. I focused too much on what was happening to everyone else that I stopped really looking at what was happening on my own ranch. Now what I have to do is I have to set up all this fence. I'll try and get a few quick shots just to show you guys what I'm working with. I don't know how it's gonna work out. To be honest with you, I'm actually kind of nervous about this whole thing, moving cows over here. There's just no protection for these girls if they happen to work their way out of this pasture. They'll be long gone. So it wouldn't be a huge deal if I was home every day and I could come down, multiple times a day and check on them, but things are a little different for me working 24-hour shifts. I'm nervous. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it ends up working out. As you can see, I just did that two strand turbo wire. I think this will work. This section over here, keeping them out of the pond, this is what I'm worried about. These posts are going to get full sun all day, coming from the east and then the south, and then as the sun sets in the west, they're just going to get baked all day. So I could see these getting really soft and snapping on me. But I think as long as we can keep voltage up, let's see where we're at here, 6,000, 8,000. So I think as long as we can keep voltage up, and then the grounding, obviously, that's enough. If there's not a good ground connection, then they're not going to feel that 8,000 kilovolt shock. So I guess we'll have to see. My other concern is deer running through here. If you guys have any thoughts, any ideas, let me know down below.